The ongoing war in Ukraine has devastated the region, causing immense suffering and geopolitical instability. Amidst the chaos, former U.S. President Donald Trump has emerged as a vocal advocate for peace, calling for negotiations and a swift end to the conflict. Trump's stance, however, has been met with resistance from European leaders, highlighting a fundamental ideological divide between his realist foreign policy approach and the European Union's commitment to democracy promotion and containing Russian influence. This essay will explore the contrasting worldviews shaping the responses to the Ukraine crisis. We will delve into Trump's emphasis on great power competition and national interest, juxtaposed against Europe's support for Ukraine's integration into Western institutions. By examining the failed peace deal of March 2022 and the suppression of dissenting voices within Europe, we can gain a deeper understanding of the forces shaping the current geopolitical landscape. Finally, we will consider Trump's calls for negotiation and the possibility of finding a middle ground to achieve a lasting peace in the region. The conflict in Ukraine is not merely a territorial dispute, it represents a clash of ideologies and a struggle for influence on the world stage. Understanding the motivations and goals of the key actors is crucial for navigating the complexities of this crisis and finding a path towards a peaceful resolution. At the heart of the divide between Trump and European elites lies a fundamental difference in their approach to international relations. European leaders champion a foreign policy rooted in liberal internationalism. They emphasize democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Supporting Ukraine aligns with expanding democratic values and containing Russia. Trump subscribes to a realist worldview. Realist foreign policy prioritizes national interest and power. It views the international system as anarchic and self-preserving. This leads to skepticism of democracy promotion and foreign interventions. Realists emphasize balance of power and avoiding unnecessary entanglements. This clash impacts the West's approach to the Ukraine conflict. European leaders defend democratic values while Trump focuses on American interests. This difference leads to tensions over the best course of action in Ukraine. Trump's foreign policy, encapsulated in America First, reflects his realist outlook. He prioritizes U.S. interests and criticizes unfair trade deals. Trump advocates for a transactional approach, focusing on bilateral agreements. In the Ukraine conflict, he is reluctant to commit significant U.S. resources. He argues the U.S. should focus on domestic challenges. This skepticism towards interventionism prioritizes U.S. economic and security interests. Trump's America First approach clashes with European leaders on Ukraine. They see supporting Ukraine as a moral imperative, while Trump views it as harmful to U.S. interests. European leaders aim to expand the EU and promote democracy in neighboring countries. This is to create a stable and prosperous Europe after decades of conflict. Integrating former Soviet bloc countries like Poland and Hungary and the Baltic states extends democracy and free markets eastward. Ukraine, with its strategic location, is a key target. Bringing Ukraine into the EU expands economic and political influence. Russia views this as a threat to its security interests. The conflict in Ukraine is a proxy war between Russia and the West. Both sides vie for influence over Ukraine's future. Supporting Ukraine defends European security interests. This stance, however, escalates the conflict, complicating peace efforts. Silencing dissent, the price of opposition. The war in Ukraine has exposed a concerning trend in the West, particularly in Europe: the suppression of dissenting voices and the narrowing of acceptable discourse on the conflict. While a certain degree of unity is expected during times of crisis, the stifling of debate and the labeling of any alternative perspective as pro-Russian or Kremlin propaganda raises concerns about freedom of speech and the health of democratic societies. This trend is particularly noticeable in Europe, where governments and media outlets have taken a hard line against any narrative that deviates from the official pro-Ukraine stance. Journalists, academics, and public figures who express skepticism about the West's role in the conflict or who advocate for a negotiated settlement have faced accusations of treason, professional ostracism, and even threats of violence. This climate of fear and censorship has created an environment where dissenting voices are silenced, limiting the possibility of open and honest debate about the best course of action in Ukraine. The suppression of dissent in the West raises important questions about the commitment to free speech and the ability to engage in critical self-reflection. The silencing of alternative perspectives hinders the search for a peaceful resolution and risks exacerbating the conflict by fueling a climate of polarization and mistrust. A deal undone, the missed chance for peace. In the early days of the conflict, a glimmer of hope for a negotiated settlement emerged in March 2022, when Russia and Ukraine reportedly came close to reaching a peace agreement. The proposed deal would have seen Russia withdraw its forces to their pre-invasion positions in exchange for Ukraine pledging not to join NATO and maintaining a neutral status. However, this potential breakthrough was short-lived. Reports suggest that the deal was scuttled due to pressure from Western powers, particularly the United Kingdom and the United States, who reportedly urged Ukraine to continue fighting, believing that Russia's military setbacks presented an opportunity to weaken Moscow's position. This alleged intervention highlights the complex interplay of interests and calculations at play in the conflict, where the pursuit of strategic objectives can sometimes overshadow the imperative for peace. The failure of the March 2022 peace deal underscores the missed opportunities for a peaceful resolution in Ukraine. The intervention of Western powers, whether intentional or not, raises questions about the motivations driving their involvement in the conflict and whether their actions are truly aligned with the goal of achieving a lasting peace. Russian anxieties, security concerns, and red lines. Understanding Russia's perspective is crucial for comprehending the complexities of the Ukraine conflict. For Moscow, Ukraine holds immense strategic importance, not only due to its shared history and cultural ties but also because of its geographic location. Ukraine serves as a buffer zone between Russia and NATO, and its potential accession to the alliance has been a long-standing red line for the Kremlin. Russia views NATO expansion as a direct threat to its security interests, pushing the alliance closer to its borders and undermining its regional influence. The prospect of Ukraine joining NATO, coupled with the increasing military cooperation between Ukraine and Western countries, has fueled Russian anxieties and created a sense of encirclement. This perception of vulnerability has been a key factor driving Russia's actions in Ukraine. While Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a clear violation of international law and cannot be justified, understanding the Kremlin's security concerns and its perception of NATO expansionism as a threat provides crucial context for analyzing the conflict and exploring potential paths towards a negotiated settlement. Ignoring Russia's security concerns or dismissing them as mere pretexts for aggression will only perpetuate the cycle of mistrust and make a peaceful resolution more elusive. Seeking common ground, Trump's plea for negotiation. Amidst the ongoing conflict, former President Trump has emerged as a vocal advocate for a negotiated settlement in Ukraine. He has repeatedly called on both sides to engage in diplomacy and find a peaceful resolution to the conflict, arguing that continued fighting will only lead to more suffering and instability. Trump's calls for negotiation, while criticized by some as appeasement, offer a pragmatic alternative to the current impasse. Trump's approach recognizes the need to address Russia's security concerns while also respecting Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. He has suggested that a potential solution could involve Ukraine remaining neutral, refraining from joining NATO, and potentially granting some form of autonomy to the Donbas region. While such a compromise would require concessions from both sides, it could provide a framework for a lasting peace and prevent further bloodshed. Trump's emphasis on dialogue and compromise while challenging the prevailing narrative in the West offers a glimmer of hope for a peaceful resolution to the Ukraine conflict. By acknowledging the legitimate security concerns of all parties involved and seeking common ground, it may be possible to bridge the divides and find a path towards a more stable and secure future for the region.